Hi, Stella. Welcome to Immunity Group Australia's podcast.
Hi, Nina. It's lovely to meet you. I think this has
I'm
been a long time
fascinated to hear.
coming.
Yes, no, I'm really excited to hear about your background as a chef, for someone who is not a very good cook at all, nearly burning the kitchen down every time. I admire the skills which every chef has. And I wanted to ask you, is how did you get involved in this hospitality advocacy sphere? Is it because you saw what happens behind the scenes?
Yeah, it's twofold really. I grew up with having problems eating. Even when I was born, I was born at home. And within a few hours, I was rushed into hospital because I couldn't feed. I was there. My sister tells me that I was there for 10 days. My mother won't speak about it. She denies it.
The
Um,
trauma.
yes, yes. So anyway, life carried on, and yeah, I had all through my childhood, I had problems with various foods. Eggs made me sick, um, and I came out with rashes and hives and itching quite a lot. Um, but nothing was ever really done about it. Um, but I loved cooking. So I trained to be a chef. I trained in hospitality in Brighton down the south coast of England. And then, yeah, so I was a chef, worked in hospitality. Um, and that really, looking back, gave me a good way to avoid eating. Through my childhood, I'd learnt coping strategies of how to avoid foods. But this was my big turning point, was that I didn't have to eat, because although I was in a kitchen, I might just literally have a taste. I wouldn't have to eat a full blown meal. I could tell my mum at home that I'd eaten. I could tell work I'm eating when I get home.
Wow, that's really fascinating. Was
So
there anybody in your environment who was able to speak to you about it at the time?
no, I hid it all the time. I hid it because all the time I was well and I didn't have a reaction. Everything was fine. Um, and then, as time went on, got married, um, had our son. And while I was pregnant with my son, that was the only time in my life I've been able to eat eggs. So it makes me wonder if hormones are involved somewhere with the immune system, because eggs had always made me vomit. While I was pregnant, I craved them, I could eat them. And then a few weeks after my son was born, back to the way it was before and worse.
What about him? Was he able to eat eggs and other
Um,
things?
Strangely, he can eat eggs, but he doesn't like them.
Fair enough.
Yeah,
Fair enough. But
it's
he
one of
doesn't
those
have
strange
food.
situations.
Do you have any food intolerances or allergies or not?
I believe he does. Um, I believe he has the same condition as I have, which has now been identified as EOE, or eosinophilic esophagitis, for those who don't know the full term. I believe he has that, but he doesn't want to take it any further and get tested. He's just having the was he taking the PPIs every day to suppress the acid. So, I can't make him do that. He's 35, 36 now, 37. He's 37 now.
But
So,
you're leading advocacy in this field, and this is incredible, to be the voice of change in your community and globally as well, I believe. Um, did that start recently, or when did Food Allergy Friends begin?
Food Allergy Friends was an idea I had back in 2000, 2005, 6, around there. Um, when I I started to study nutrition to try and identify what was causing my problems because the GPs couldn't help me. They didn't know. Um, they kept saying, "Oh, we can't find anything wrong with you. It's just heartburn. It's just indigestion." Um, and then I thought, no, there's more to this because I know when I eat certain things, I get problems. Um, and I pinpointed it to things like cheese and chocolate, and so the high histamine foods. And then I thought, oh, hold on, eggs as well. Yes, I still can't eat eggs. So started to study nutrition. And then from there, I went to the Allergy and Free From show in London. And there I met Amanda Cordell from, um, she now is well, the face and the driver of EOS Network, who's the charity. And she literally saved my life because that was the first time I'd heard of this condition. And we got talking at the Allergy Free From show. I took the information back to my GP, and they were still saying, no, can't possibly be, it's too rare. And then all this time I was still working in catering. And so it was still very difficult that, and of course the other thing the GPs were saying was, oh, you can't possibly have that because you'd be skinny, you wouldn't be overweight, which again is not true because I was eating a lot of sugary foods. So again, we cracked on, and yeah, it, sorry.
No, it's incredible how it was self-led. You led yourself to discovery through this amazing event
Mm,
by meeting that one person.
yeah, and then because I was in hospitality, and hearing in 2011 about the changes in the allergy information laws that were actually not implemented until 2014. And we knew they were coming. So I did a bit more research and thought we've got to do this. And at that point, I decided we need to do something and set up some sort of scheme, some training, some information. And that's how Food Allergy Friends came about. And it's now been split into two parts, in that I've got two websites. One is for the allergic community, and there's information and tips, recipes. Um, I'm trying to build a support group on Facebook from that as well. But then there's the training side of it because I had to get out of the kitchen eventually because raw onion and curry nearly got me in the air. And so I decided I needed to train myself as a trainer. So I did the courses, qualifications to become a trainer so that now I can give the benefit of my experience along with accredited courses to hospitality, to families. This is a new venture I'm trying to get into, is to help families when they're newly diagnosed. Do they know how to keep their family safe in the home, in your own kitchen? And that I'm finding is a big thing, which I want to try and develop. So there's a lot of things I'm passionate about and I want to do, and it's all related to food and allergies.
So when you train hospitality venues, what are some of the most common questions which surprise you in terms of perhaps the lack of knowledge in that community, or what, because you would have heard so many different questions, but what would be the most surprising ones to you?
Oh. The one that always gets me is, about shed fryers. Yes, our chips are gluten-free, but they're cooked in the same fryer. People still don't understand, and they will ask, "Well, why is it not gluten-free? Because the fryer's hot enough that it kills gluten." No, that's not the case. That's not how it works. Um, but yeah, it's I don't know. I like to say there's no such thing as a silly question, but you do still hear them. Um, a little bit won't hurt you, or oh, what happens to you if you have a bit of that? Um, and just some of the questions can get a bit personal as well. Um,
And do you find it's easier to work with business owners directly or with staff? Or at what level of communication do you think that message of food allergy seriousness comes through the best? Do you take multi-track approach by educating everybody, or how does it work in practice?
well, it's difficult because you need to get the business owners to understand, because they're the ones who are paying for the training for their staff. They're the ones who need to make sure that their business is compliant and that their staff know what they're doing and are keeping the customers safe. But then from the other angle coming up is people who are going into the industry. It's important for them to take that knowledge with them. And I'm finding like some chefs. There's one chef actually I worked a long time ago with who had a fish allergy, and he was the fish chef, but he could. It was a contact, you know.
Wow.
So he had, even back then he had to wear gloves. Um, so that getting into the lower levels is so important. But the thing that I find the hardest to deal with is the language barriers, because here in the UK, particularly, we're such a melting pot of nationalities and culture. Um, and there are a lot of people who still don't have that understanding. And all I only train in English. So I find it difficult to go to, say, an Indian restaurant or a Chinese restaurant, or um, even an English hotel where they have got foreign staff. And I hate using that word, but people who don't have English as their first language
That's
find
a
it
really good
extremely
point. That's
difficult.
a really good point. I think the government has a big role in this to play because there's so many multicultural communities in England, like in Australia,
Mm.
and there are support services for linguistic and cultural, cross-cultural communication. So perhaps that could be one avenue of working with multi-ethnic communities to put that message across. What a brilliant idea.
It needs to be done, really needs to be done, because we all like, say we all, a lot of people like to go for a, a curry or a Chinese meal or an Italian meal. And if you can't have that communication between customer and staff because of the language, it's very dangerous.
Absolutely fantastic point. What about schools, hospitality schools, and chef schools for chefs? Do you think at that level the understanding is better now than in the past when you perhaps trained? When you go back and look at their curricula, what do you feel about that?
I think it's better, because when I did my college course for hospitality, the food safety was just coming in. So we're talking about early 1980. So that was when it was fairly new, even food safety. So now I believe that's even taught in some of our secondary and comprehensive schools as part of the curriculum. There's a basic food safety for some of them. I won't say for all because it's not. But to go on to college to train as a chef, or even further education as a chef, I think the allergen side of things, it is coming in, but it's very slowly. And there's still a lot of room for improvement.
And you may also raise a very good point about families who have been just diagnosed and most feel completely lost. Firstly, there is not much support from the system. Secondly, there is so much information on the internet, that a lot of scary stories.
Mhm.
So how do you assist newly diagnosed families? What are some of the strategies which you use to make them feel at ease before you start the formal training side of things?
Oh, well, I'll be completely honest here. I haven't actually got as far as delivering any training yet, but from my own experience, um, it's going through um, things like storage and how to keep food separate. Um, I know, excuse me, a friend of mine has very severe celiac disease. Excuse me. And she has to have a separate cupboard completely for her food. Just putting it in a plastic container in the same cupboard is not enough, because there's still that risk of cross contamination. So things like that, and alternatives. What can we use instead of that allergen that we've just been told we can't have anymore? It's finding what we can use instead that reacts the same way or in a similar way. Um, because gluten-free bread is never going to be the same as regular wheat bread. It's
I might
so
ask you a question. Why do always gluten-free breads in Australia have added egg white? What's the logic behind that?
because egg white holds together in a similar way to gluten. And this is what I find as well. It's so difficult to find a gluten-free bread that doesn't have egg white in.
Yep, same
I
in
have
Australia.
I have found two. One I go to is my go-to brand. I have that all the time. But it's like £3.60. I don't know how this compares in Australia, but in the UK it's £3.60 British pounds for a loaf of bread that has about 10 slices in it. Whereas you can buy a regular loaf of bread with 18 slices in it for 80 pence, 90 pence. So
Wow, so the
it can be
cost
three
for
times the price,
and it's
for
the
four times the
economic side
price.
argument that food allergy families and families with celiac disease have to pay much more to be safe
Yes.
than a regular shopper
Yeah, and
consumer.
I can understand why that is, because there's so much work goes into developing those products, because um, you know, gluten doesn't react the same as rice. You can't get that same texture to a dish by using rice. If you have to exclude eggs, what do you use instead to make pancakes? There are alternatives, but it's knowing what they are.
And manufacturers often are not really investing in the new products. I mean, we are probably lucky now compared to 20 years ago, but at the free from allergy shows in Australia and in the UK, there are, for example, products which are being marketed as new products, but there isn't much, there isn't enough. A lot of our food allergy families are still struggling, especially in Australia from regional areas, to access safe
Mm.
foods.
Yes, and this is a problem I have, because where I live, it's rural. On Okay, my nearest town is it's only 3 miles away, but they don't carry the range of products. So for me to get a full shop, I have to go to my nearest city, which happens to be Gloucester. So that's a 40-minute drive each way to go shopping. I can't get everything in one shop. So, there's about 4 or 5 different shops I have to go to do a full shop, and that just makes it so expensive.
Of course, it's accessibility and the cost
Mm,
of foods. And in recent weeks in the UK, there was a lot of discussion about food allergies after the tragic incident at Costa Coffee.
yes.
What were your thoughts when you saw this debate? And obviously, being in the UK, how do you feel about this new activism or this conversation? It's a national conversation, I feel, in the UK right now.
It is, it's very prominent, because we've just had, um, the inquest last week for Hannah, from the Costa, the hot chocolate. There's debate going on about, oh, well, she didn't have her EpiPens. Her mother only told the server to wash out the milk jug. Um, but there was also a lack of communication, and protocols were not followed. The problem I think we have is a lot of these big companies are actually franchised out. So each venue is not so strictly under the rules of the main header of the company. They should be, but I don't understand how that all works, but I think it plays an important role. And as a company, they need to be, and any large company, I'm not just picking on Costa because they've been in the news, but any large chain company that runs as a franchise needs to make sure that every venue that carries their name is following the rules, because it affects them as a whole company. It's not just that one outlet.
And is this what you found across the board for different type of chains in the UK?
Yes. Yes, there was a case not long ago of, a well-known, takeaway getting into trouble for using the wrong coating, but that was picked up by, one of the main company inspectors. I believe that they went and did an inspection, and they discovered that this venue was using an unapproved coating, and they do it to make more money, and that's the problem all the time. It's down to money.
And what about the government side of things in terms of regulations? Do you think the government regulations go far enough, or in what way could the UK government, in this particular case, improve its practices? Where do you think they could improve on?
Um, there's a lot of room for improvement. For a start, alcohol business owners and premises have to be licensed, and I know in some countries, food business premises and owners have to be licensed, and managers as well have to hold a license, which proves that they have done the training and they know what they're doing. We don't have that here for food businesses. Anybody who wants to do it can go online, register their own kitchen as a food business. They then have to wait for the EHOs to come round to inspect, to make sure their kitchen's clean and at standard. But they can still go ahead and produce food for the public. Um, if there was licensing, they would have to have that in place before they even opened, which isn't the case here. Um, Food safety training and food allergen management training is not compulsory. As long as somebody on the premises holds a certificate, they can say they've trained everybody else. And all they have to do is demonstrate by getting them to fill in a questionnaire and signing that they've been told. That counts as training. That's got to stop. Everyone who works in food production, any situation, should have a food safety certificate, food allergen awareness at least, preferably allergen management certificate, and training, and prove their competence before they're let loose to feed people.
That's a fascinating point, and it goes back to your point earlier about the language barrier and the importance of communicating across different languages for the sake of safety and public food safety. Um, in terms of children and schools and school kitchens, did you have much experience with training school kitchens or chefs in that field?
No, I haven't ventured into school kitchens. Um, the reason being is that a lot of schools actually took their kitchens out.
That's interesting.
Yeah, there was some years ago a move for kitchens to be taken out of schools. Everybody had to take a packed lunch or go home for lunch, because they needed the space for the classrooms, basically. So they didn't have actual school kitchens. They are starting to bring them back. It's more like the private schools that have kept them. Um, but there is another lady who's focusing on educational catering, and that's not me.
There's so many facets of hospitality and layers, and it's fascinating that you are in this space right now, because this is something that's necessary right now for everybody in the hospitality industry and business. Is there any sort of pan-European organization or a local organization that you're a member of in a network of people who do similar type of work to you?
Not as an organization, no. I'm not aware that there is anything nationally. Um, I support the charities like Natasha's Allergy Research Foundation. I follow them closely. We have Allergy UK, we have anaphylaxis campaign. Some years ago, Allergy UK did start like an accreditation scheme for people to register their business as allergy aware, but that seems to be non-existent at the moment. I don't know what happened, but it just didn't seem to take off. And I think there's a problem with getting the message across to the hospitality business owners that they're the ones who need to step up to the plate and get their staff trained. They're the ones who need to understand and implement it. Once they do that, they can then take the step of getting recognised. But I'm not aware of there being any organisation as a whole to cover this aspect of industry.
So is it difficult to do it alone? How do you feel about
Very,
that?
very difficult to do it alone. I do know, of two other ladies who are doing it. One based near Southampton and one up in Manchester. So they've got the north and the south covered, um, and they're working hard. I work with them on occasion, so we are pulling together. There are lots of apps, there are lots of websites, but it's difficult to know, who to go to.
And tell me about your newsletter. You have announced that you're on your website that you're launching a newsletter. What do you hope to achieve with the newsletter?
Oh, wow. Um, what I'd like to do is for that to be a resource for people who have food allergies. So I'm now calling it Allergy Family because everyone who has an allergy is part of their own immediate family, but we are a community as well. And I want it to be a place where we can share our stories, encourage each other, find out about what's going on in the world of allergies, in the realms of research, new treatments, um, all those kinds of things, but also any events that are coming up, and for recipes. I'm going to be putting at the moment it's going to be one recipe a month, but those recipes are going to build into a resource as well, and I'm trying to do it top 14 free, because I'm very aware that not everybody's allergic to all 14 allergens. But if you know you've got that recipe that is top 14 free, it can feed anybody. And I'm very much of the mind that just because it's safe for me as the person with allergies doesn't mean it's horrible for you, or that you can't have it because you don't have allergies. Because there's this concept of free from food tasting awful, having a horrible texture, and it doesn't need to be that way.
I think we're gonna all be looking for reading your book at the end of the 12-month period with the 12 recipes.
I better start writing a book.
Well, all these recipes will probably form a little book at the end of a year, after 12 months of publishing the newsletter. I think this is where probably we'll end this podcast. I would like to thank you, Stella Holt from Food Allergy Friends, and encourage all our listeners to check out your websites. And what is your Facebook group called?
It's a Food Allergy Friends support.
Everybody can join in, I believe. Is that correct?
I will open it. It's at the moment it's a closed group, a private group, but I will open it for a time, um, and see what happens.
And we can speak again at the next available opportunity when we can perhaps discuss some of your published recipes at the time.
I'd love to do that. I'd love to.
Thank you so much. And we will speak to you soon again. Stella Holt from Food Allergy Friends. Thank you very much.
Thank you.